I was asked to write the Gender Games. It's a slightly unusual situation in that I had done an interview with Patrick Strudwick for UK BuzzFeed about my coming out and about coming out as trans about 3 years ago now. And the very next Monday, a publisher got in touch and said, "Have you thought about writing a memoir?" And I was like, no, because I'm so young, so impossibly young. And I thought, you know, memoirs were for my deathbed, kind of. But I was really interested in writing a book of like essays about gender and about the different ways in which gender impacts on our lives, regardless of your gender identity, whether you're a man or woman or trans or cisgender. I really think we are all, you know, bombarded with stereotypes and very limited notions of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. And I was really into that. And so when I sat down to write the book, though, I realised that it was a memoir. It was like an accidental memoir because, you know, gender started to affect me the day I was born. And so actually we start off by looking at the ways that gender affected me as a baby and then kind of move through my life, really. We call the book The Gender Games because it sounds a bit like the Hunger Games, and it reflects my YA background. I'm an author of YA fiction as well. And I think that's what it is. Gender, on one hand, it's this incredibly serious thing. You know, being born into this world as a girl limits you from the day you're born. And we know that globally. Girls are disadvantaged in ways that boys are not. Similarly, to be born transgender could be seen as, you know, a hindrance to some and a celebration to others as well. And of course, in many ways, masculinity can be a nightmare as well. So on one hand, there is some like Hunger Games life and death stuff there, but similarly we're all free to play with gender as well, because on a smaller scale, you know, gender is in my hair, it's in my makeup, it's in my clothes, it's in my interactions on a day-to-day basis. So we are all free to an extent to play around with notions of male or female because they're not set in stone. I think we put a weird pressure on both women and people from minority groups to be role models, and it's impossible because none of us are perfect. And I think as soon as you start holding up anyone to be role model material, you're in for trouble. And actually a lot of my favourite role models are people who have made mistakes, are people who've gone wrong, and you hold your hands up and you say, yeah, I got it wrong. Because if we're not free to make mistakes, if we're not free to go wrong, that's more pressure than I could deal with. That said, especially when I wrote some of my non-fiction for teenagers, like This Book Is Gay, for example, you know, I hoped that would find its way to the right hands, and I hoped it would in some way help people. Yeah, I mean, I have to start a good 90% of my sentences with the phrase either speaking for myself or I don't speak on behalf of the trans community. There are as many ways to be trans as there are transgender people. And the whole thing with the Gender Games is that actually it takes the topic of gender games beyond trans people, actually, because I think the danger as well, if you become kind of like a spokesperson, that you are kind of just, it's a bit of an echo chamber, you're just speaking to your community. And actually it's about reaching outside of that community anyway, because I can't speak on behalf of that community. You know, I've been transitioning now for nearly 4 years, but I'm still a baby to it. I'm still very new to this. I'm making it up as I go along. I don't know what I'm talking about, ever. Never. I'm not even making this up, but I think reality TV has been the single most important societal change for LGBT people in the last 20 years. And I know there's been some like real activism taking place, but for people like my mum, for people like my dad and my grandma and my stepmom, actually seeing LGBT people in Big Brother, in Pop Idol, has created a change because it's normalised it and humanised us. Like when you see somebody like Nadia on Big Brother, we spent a whole summer with her and we really got to know her as an individual, and she wasn't just a trans woman. She was a real character and she was Nadia. She was fully Nadia. And, you know, since Nadia, we've seen a little trickle and more trans people kind of break through into the mainstream. And obviously that culminated with Caitlyn Jenner, who was, you know, huge celebrity presence. And so now I don't think there's many people who don't know what a transgender person is. And that's because of reality TV and social media as well, because I think YouTube is important too.